Hey, welcome to a Friday afternoon edition of the Garden
Hey,
Report.
we live.
Josue Pavon dropping in, and got a lot on the table today. If as people start filing in here, we've got Damian Lillard talking about destinations, even though he hasn't demanded trade yet. We,
You do one podcast, Bobby. That's all it takes. Jeez.
yeah, he's always talking about something, and so this latest nugget, and I know he did a podcast, right, that you saw where I forget what podcast it was exactly, but they're asking him about where he'd go if he got traded, and his primary spots were obviously Miami and the Brooklyn Nets to team up with Mikal Bridges, which is interesting, probably exciting for them. No mention of the Celtics though until he went on Dan Patrick or Chris Haynes rather, who's
Well, Chris Haynes went on Dan Patrick. That's right. Yeah.
very connected with Damian Lillard. Went on there and Patrick pitched the Celtics. I don't have the sound, but effectively said, Celtics they might be making some moves. They're close to the finals. Could he end up there? And Haynes started laughing his ass off and was like, "It's not going to be Boston." Sounded
Damn.
almost certain that Lillard, who, by all accounts here, Fisher and some other reports, that if he wants to move, they'll get him where he wants to go in the East. And it's starting to sound like with all these podcasts, he's on Instagram Live yesterday and a bunch of nuggets here that Lillard might be on the move this offseason. Maybe this is more pressure for them to get that number 3 pick moved, to start to improve this roster around him, because it was another disastrous season for them last year. Or I'll be moving on. So, I don't know. Do you see him on the move?
It's interesting because I feel like you're seeing pressure from both sides, right? I mean, I don't know if Lillard deliberately did this podcast to send a type of message. That's not what I mean, right? I just mean like he's been sort of open with his thought process, right? I mean, first it was the tweet to the fan base telling them, look, if you guys really want this to happen, write up a petition to get me traded, and I'll waive the no trade clause. I think that was his way of kind of expressing his frustration. That look, I'm tired of this whole, let's just start over and I can go chase a championship elsewhere. Like I want to make it happen here, but at the same time, I want to apply that pressure to the organization to see what they can come up with during the offseason. So I think that's what we're seeing right now. I feel like, for obvious reasons, he's looking at he's from the outside looking in, right? Saying like, man, we didn't even make the playoffs. Like, how far are we from contending? And no, I don't want to give up. But if I have to send that type of message to get things done to push the ball here, then I will. So it's going to be interesting to see which side gets what they want, because Portland has to do something here. I mean, it's not getting any better, right? I mean, you look at the Western Conference, you see how competitive it is, and you're trying to figure out how they can bring in an all-star or someone of that caliber to work with, Damian Lillard. Look, if I'm the Portland Trailblazers, I'm hoping a situation like Boston goes sour between Jaylen Brown and the organization, right? I'm looking at any all-star, any all NBA players that I can somehow, attract, whether that's through, being disgruntled, looking for a new situation, or the biggest, selling point that they have, teaming up with Damian Lillard. So we'll see
Yeah,
what
and
happens.
that's an ancillary reason I think that Lillard would approach it this way and rule out the Celtics, because, of course, if he shows interest in the Celtics are going to be sitting there saying, all right, why would we make a deal with Portland to improve them when if he wants
Yeah.
out, he could come here?
And that's the
Uh,
thing too. I don't think he wants out. Like I really don't think. I think even if Boston is whatever number 10 or whatever on his list, I still think Portland is number one, and it's a high number one, right? I
yeah.
mean, if it comes down to it, I'm sure he'll be willing to move on. But right now, it's still at the top of his list. And I just think this season is that make or break season, which for most people it felt like it should have been this year or the year before. But just from what we're seeing from Damian Lillard and his behavior lately, I feel like is this one. This is the summer where they got to do something.
Yeah, and they want to build around him. It's clear. If he wanted out, he could be gone today. I don't think he has to dance around that. Maybe there is some pause on the Portland side. I do wish we had our guy Sean Hyken here, who's pretty well connected over there on that side, about what their interest is here, because I doubt they want to move on from a guy like Shaden Sharp, who showed enormous promise last year. Um, Jeremy Grant's a free agent. I don't know what they're going to do there. Even
Yeah.
Anthony Simons, who I think KOC put out there today, They're finally starting to float him a little bit, but they really like him too. And this is what we kicked around the other day, Josue, with the Jaylen Brown stuff is, yeah, if you're a Celtics fan, you can sit here and say, all right, we can get this, this, and that. But you wonder how these other teams actually feel about it. And the biggest or most realistic trade I think we kicked around earlier this week was some combination of Simons, the number 3 pick, and an additional salary. Maybe it's necessary a little. Maybe it's a bigger trade with Jeremy Grant mixed in there somehow. That's the kind of trade that I think would actually get the Celtics a little interested in moving off Brown and would put a star next to Lillard. Now, I wonder, is that enough for Lillard? Is it enough for the Blazers landing a guy like Jaylen Brown? Does that actually put them in the mix out west to make it worth giving up on the number 3 pick, to make it worth moving on from some of the other depth on the roster there, unless they're getting another guy like Malcolm Brogdon there? This is a tough call both ways, but I look around the league and I think it's going to be tough for the Blazers to find another guy to put next to Lillard aside from Brown.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, because they wouldn't be done, right? That's not a championship team. It's a playoff team. I like the chance to make the playoffs, but I don't think you put them in the top, upper echelon of the Western Conference. I mean, you're still a piece away, but it's better than what they have now. I'll tell you that much. And I think it would excite, obviously, Damian Lillard and Jaylen Brown. I mean, Jaylen Brown would, I think you probably get the best of Jaylen just off the fact that the Celtics traded him and they made that type of deal without giving him his max money. Now, I don't think he's the type of guy who's going to sulk for long, right? I think once he puts that, Blazers uniform on, it's on. And having that type of talent next to Damian Lillard, I think, again, yeah, that's a playoff team for sure, but they're not a championship caliber team, right? If anything, you probably bought another 2 years for Lillard to, be somewhat pleased, but you have to make up the rest of that roster. And, that's a whole nother hurdle. But if you're Portland, you want to just get to that point. And you also don't want to give up too much, right? Because you want to have at least a piece or two that can really complement those guys.
Yeah, I think they would want to keep Grant in that case.
Yeah,
Then
I
you
think
have
that's
Brown,
Grant. Yeah.
you have Brown, Grant, Sharp, Lillard, and Nurkic, along with whatever bench they're able to put around that group, which is getting somewhere. I mean, if Brown continues this trajectory and it's Lillard and Brown, wing type more than a Simons next to him, you're talking about a team that's probably a little better defensively, and that's been their problem in recent years. And then, there's a lot of competition in the West. It's going to be tricky there. From the Celtics perspective, I still don't know where they stand on this Brown thing. I don't think we've received any indication that they're going to give this full supermax yet, because if they did that, I think he's staying. Like, I don't think there's any doubt that he's staying at that point. If they come in a little bit lower, and the name I compared him to in the Celtics blog piece I have coming out is Rudy Gobert, who did get this enormous contract because he was supermax eligible, winning the Defensive Player of the Year there in Utah. But they only gave him 31% of the cap rather than the 35% that Brown's coming in at. So if they offered him something like that, would he accept? Would there be some pause? Would he threaten free agency? That's interesting stuff we're going to see over the next month here. But it's just been weirdly silent on that front. And I do wonder, obviously, if you're moving Brown, I think you ideally want to see a guy like Lillard come back. So you're saying star for star, we may be even upgrading here. Same as Kevin Durant last summer. As much as John and even Jimmy are intrigued by the Simons deal, Josue, and I've even been moved by it a little bit, I do think there's a scenario here where you end up much worse if Simons is inconsistent or struggles defensively. If the pick busts, certainly, and you have no clue who's going to be there at number 3. Right now, it seems like Scoot could drop to that, but the Hornets take Scoot number 3. You're taking Brandon Miller, who's going to be a wing who's worse than Brown immediately. It's risky stuff, so I understand why the Celtics, at least from Brad Stevens' perspective, are looking at it and saying, we want Jaylen here.
Yeah, because that's the best move for short term, right? I mean, people can say what they want, they can make
What it is.
hypothetical trades, but realistically, I mean, that's the best option. I don't see them upgrading off of Jaylen Brown unless something like that happens, where there's a Damian Lillard or even I mean, I really don't even see it. One name I tossed around who I thought about just because of what the team is going through and the organization is looking to shake things up. I mean, according to reports, they're trying really hard to trade Zach LaVine, right? The Chicago Bulls. And it's interesting because, Ball's hurt. They don't have a whole lot of flexibility with financially, so you're wondering who would take that trade and what they get in return. But look at someone like DeMar DeRozan, who, if you were to trade him, you grant his bird rights. You can re-sign him. You can go over salary cap. It won't hurt you as much, and he's not a max guy, right? You're not going to pay the same type of dollars. And you look at another situation like a player like Damian Lillard, where you're like, okay, both of these guys are a bit older, a little seasoned, right? They still have plenty left, but you wonder how much of that is left. And I think out of everyone else, out of other potential, trading partners and candidates out there, I think those are the only two where you can somewhat get that same value that you're giving up in Jaylen Brown. But the other end of that is, how do you supplement the rest of the roster and how that player is going to look in the next 2 years? So, I mean, overall, I just think for the short term, if you're keeping this core together, the Celtics are better off keeping Jaylen, but it's just going to get really hard when it comes to adding talent around Tatum and Brown, and just the life with two super max guys is something that we've never seen before. So I think that's the scary part too, right?
Yeah, the implications of that ultimately will be once I think it's Brogdon, White, and Horford coming up after 2025. Will be tough to keep those guys. And fortunately, Rob and Smart, I think two of your key younger guys are signed through 2026. So, everyone always kicks around trading Smart. I don't think it's happening just because he's on such a great contract through 2026. He's a guy that you can keep next to Brown and Tatum, and great point guard. I still look at him as that, even if he's not your ideal point guard. Still does a good job there defensively and all the rest. But all of those guys, all the depth you talk about, if you sign Brown for $50 million a year, they're effectively heading out the window. Grant certainly is here if he gets any significant offer this offseason. And then you're looking at Brogdon, who a lot of people are starting to talk about trading Brogdon, Josue. I don't see
Yeah.
it.
I think it's a contract thing though, more than anything, Bobby. Not that like he's making way too much money, but just if you're gonna bring in a
If you're
top
going
tier
to keep
guy,
Brown,
you got to use that. You got to use that contract. Well, this is the same people that don't want to see Jaylen get traded either. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm one of those guys right now. I just don't know who he is in the postseason. I feel tricked. I feel like we should have saw this thing coming just because of who he's been in the past, and we gave him the benefit of the doubt, obviously, because of what he showed throughout the regular season. But I mean, look, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world they kept him. But if you're trying to add pieces here, add some guys who aren't that expensive, but you're going to get more of a diamond in the rough guys, right? You can go out and get a couple of those along with someone that who solidified and can come off the bench or be a rotation guy. So I just think that's just the Celtics. I think they would be doing themselves a disservice if they didn't see what his value is out there.
Yeah, we kicked around Chris Paul yesterday, or whenever we recorded at this point. Interesting nugget from Fisher today.
This background is pretty white. No, I'm not in heaven.
Interesting nugget from Jake Fisher today, who I love, who I hope we'll have on soon enough before the draft. Peyton Pritchard, the former first-round pick who fell out of Boston's rotation, has several supporters in Phoenix's front office, sources said, and is expected to feature prominently in the NBA's general trade landscape this summer when Pritchard becomes extension eligible. Do you see Pritchard as a guy who's going to capture a lot of attention this summer? I don't know what you'd get from Phoenix. Maybe he's part of a bigger deal for Paul, although Paul's coming in at $30 million next year. As I said on that show, I don't love the Paul idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of butts in that. And, even though I am one of those guys who wouldn't mind seeing him in Celtics uniform, it's got to be the veterans minimum. It's got to be, his choice, right, for that to even happen. So I don't like the idea of Celtics trading for him or keeping him on the books for, X amount of years. No, that's the only way I would like to see that happen.
Are you an Ayton guy at all?
No, I'm really not. Just because
$30 million's a lot for a center.
yeah, I mean, I know there aren't a whole lot of high level centers out there, but he's just not a guy who I feel like would fit in with this team. And I don't know, he's a bit of a question mark, especially when you hear the reports and stuff that he's gone through with the organization.
Could they get Durant? Should we do that again?
Oh no, that ship has sailed.
The Suns are doing a great job getting the offseason moving early here, and the latest on the Paul front is that they are going to try to trade him before potentially waiving him here. They could also keep him at about $17 million if they keep him on the minimum after waiving him. So we will see what happens there. In Celtics news, though, too early for that. Grant Williams, left hand surgery. Seems like a minor procedure here. I'm surprised we didn't hear about the right elbow that seemed to be bothering him back in February and played a part in that shooting slump he went through the middle of the season. Instead, it's the left hand here. Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that he'll be ready to go in time for training camp, but the first Celtic surgery that we're hearing about this summer, I imagine we'll hear about some more in due time, but this one was a little surprising.
Yeah, no, it was, especially the fact that he had to go under the knife. I mean, I don't think anyone anticipated that. Does that help the Celtics' chances of retaining him? I mean, hopefully. Like, how do you feel about that? But I know you're a big Grant guy this season, and if they're able to match any offer out there that isn't too far out of their range of 10 to 12 million or so, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, right?
Yeah, I think you need to bring him back below 13 if you want to stay below that new tax apron that they
Right.
created this year. So I could see it happening. One of the teams I look at that's interesting to me, certainly the Rockets. They have a ton of money to spend, as much as $60 million in cap room. A lot of that will go to James Harden if he signs there. You have some other teams like the Magic, mostly bad teams, the Spurs, that have money this summer. But one team that people forget about, I look back January 11th, the Pacers were the 6th seed in the East the day Halliburton went down and only played sparingly the rest of the way. And for a lot of the year, their power forward was Aaron Nesmith. And they, Fisher reported that they were looking for power forward help at the deadline. They have, I think, 29-ish million to spend this summer, give or take, 27 million at least. They could probably give Grant like 15 million or so a year. And I think that's probably too much for the Celtics to match at that point. Like, I think 13 is going to be the absolute max, but it's going to be more like 10 to 12 million, which is what they were offering him originally, right? According to
Right.
those early reports. I've also seen some people throw around, oh, maybe you could sign him for bigger money for 2 years before you go over that tax line. I think Grant's probably going to want the most money possible rather than trying to go back to free agency again in the short term and try to sign another deal after that, plus stability and all that. So I think he'll ultimately be looking for that 3-4 year deal here. And, if a team like the Pacers makes a push here, I still say, especially given the fact that Joe Mazzulla didn't like playing him, he'll probably be gone here, I think. Like, you don't want to pay a lot of money, especially long term, for a guy who's only going to play sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder if anything from the Eastern Conference Finals changed his mind in that regard, right? I mean, the fact that he was in the doghouse was sort of like, okay, well, at some point you got to use him in this series, and it was Game 2, right? And he pretty much played 25 plus minutes the rest of the way, except for Game 7. But and I think that helps in his favor, right? In his case, especially for Joe Mazzulla to pretty much show everyone that he made a mistake. I mean, that was a mistake to go into the Eastern Conference Finals not playing him, and it wasn't like he forgot to play him in Game 1, right? No, he went in intentionally without the mindset of playing him. So I think that helps his case for sure. But I mean, Grant's in a situation where I also feel like if you sign him on a team-friendly deal, you also have that flexibility to trade him down the road, right? Whether it's a 3-4 year deal, maybe 2 years into it or so, maybe that's a piece you sign with that in mind. Not to say like, okay, we'll sign you to trade you to trade you a couple of years, but it's an asset, right? And that's something that the Celtics need in a big way, man. Like
That's a big thing. We talked
all those
about
future first round picks and all those, the guys like making 10, 12 million. They don't have those guys anymore, right? I mean, a lot of those pieces is what led to what we're seeing now, the core and its foundation.
Yeah, and we talked about this when Hayward left. That you can't replace that money, and they did a pretty good job with the TPE. Like, if I want to track it back, like, they turned that TPE into Fournier, who was an attempt, and then Richardson, who becomes Derek White
Yeah.
alongside Romeo Langford, and then the last little bit there, I think, went to Mike Muscala, and he's another guy they're gonna have to make a decision on this summer.
Yeah, didn't work out, but it was worth a try.
You think they'll bring him back? $3.5 million.
I mean, with the problems that they have in the front court, they should, but it's not something that I would say is promising.
I
That
saw B-Rob. I read
he'd be a
B-Rob.
big piece this year or next year.
I read B-Rob say that they might decline the $3.5 million and try to get him to take 2 or whatever the minimum is. That would be such a weird way to save money, but I guess with where they're at, I could see it happening. And he didn't play in the playoffs, so I don't think he has much leverage at all to ask for any real money. Gallinari will be back as well at about $6 million-ish. So that's another guy that I think came here in the first place to probably compete with Grant a little bit ahead of his free agency. So you could try that again if you don't end up moving his money. But they have a lot of trade flexibility here too. You know what I was thinking about when I was looking at the Pacers? And I know this isn't going to get anyone excited, but it's, feasible here. You know who you could, if you were trading Grant to the Pacers, a
Smith?
sign and trade here? Yeah, Smith, but you could
No.
take back Tice.
Oh yeah, I guess so.
$9
I
million.
just got so amped about Smith. I've always been a fan of that guy. Just a
You could take
solid,
back both almost, I think. I want to say.
big off the bench. Yeah, I mean that would be interesting. I mean, we ran into. Well, I ran into him. What was it after game? No, it was after game 7, right? Game 7
You ran
against.
the Tice?
Yeah, Tyson's in. He was in the hallway with Grant and catching up with guys. And we spoke briefly, just hi and bye, whatever. But I remember thinking, like, man, like that would be kind of cool if he would somehow end up back on this team. But yeah, clearly the line, the connection's still there with his former teammates for him to go and check out Game 7 against Philadelphia. That's what it was, against the Sixers. It wasn't the Miami Game 7. It was Philly Game 7.
Well, that's a good lead into what I wanted to talk about here. We were playing a dome theory. Became a Garden report with some of the news here today. But of course, I'll have some interviews coming to you with people on Fridays now here. We did our group chat edition on Wednesday, Mondays. I'm probably going to be going solo most of the time. So we're going to try to bring you 3 dome theories a week here in the off season. And of course, CLNS Media's official wagering partner, as well as the Garden Report's official wagering partner. Here's the NBA Finals continues, as well as the NBA partner, FanDuel, getting you ready for Game 4 of the Finals tonight, where last I looked on the FanDuel app, a great app, I want to say the Nuggets for 3.5-point favorites. Let's see if that moved at all. 3, down to 3. So a little bit of movement toward Miami. People still believing in the Miami Heat here. They're plus 112 if you want to, or plus 120 rather if you want to bet them outright.
They just got to win one, Bobby. We got a series again.
Series price now, unbelievably, and this moved a lot because the other night I was looking, it was minus 1,200. It's down to 1,000 in favor of the Nuggets, plus 650 if you want to bet the Heat. Some really good value for a team that surprised people at every turn so far. And of course, you can do it no sweat up to $1,000 on your first bet when you head to FanDuel.com/Boston. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. There's an old graphic here. The offer's changed. No sweat bet up to $1,000. So bet up to $1,000 and you'll get it back. If you lose, and free site credit. Of course, disclaimer below. And yeah, FanDuel.com/Boston. We love them. Love the app. And on to our conversation today. And I came up with 60, Josue. I don't have clips. I was hoping to run some clips for some of these because there was a lot of great sound.
I think you got it all there, man. That's quite a list.
I asked the chat too. So Josue and I just finished our 2.5 season covering the Celtics together on the ground. That 21 year was weird. I was barely there. I think like the whole first half of the season was on Zoom.
Yeah.
So last year was sort of our first.
We're proud. Remember that?
First trek in the building, and I think we were up in the Halo for most of that year even. So this is the first full year on the ground, traveling often, being there for all these different moments. And there were a lot of moments this year. And as disappointing as the end of the season was, I did want to take some time to go back and look at some fun, some disappointing, some frustrating, as well as some funny moments throughout this season. And there were a ton of them. I came up with 60. I could probably get to 100. I'll have the rest of you fill them in the chat here. I also asked the Discord, so I'll be pulling that up as well.
I was looking at it earlier. Oh, here it is.
So let's run through these. Discord, let's see. Did they give us anything here?
What's up, Discord? I got to check in with those guys. It's been a while.
First one I see here, 51. 51 points for Jason Tatum in the Game 7 against Philadelphia. I also threw in the Game 6, which was probably my favorite post game.
Just the last 5 minutes. Yep.
Yeah, the last 5 minutes to turnaround, but it was the most incredible turnaround I've ever seen in a game. A guy going from looking dead, 1 of 10, I think, a half, right? And then he turns around and forces a Game 7 and another 2-3 comeback for Tatum. more elimination game success for him and the Celtics, which we can complain all we want about them getting into that spot, but they just keep winning games when they're in elimination games.
Yeah, no question, man. Like that was just some classic stuff right there because the season's on the line, everyone's watching. No one was giving Tatum the benefit of the doubt, right? Like us, the commentators, and everyone watching, and then he just completely put the team on his back, man. So yeah, I mean, for me, that one's up there for sure because obviously it goes into Game 7. He was in domination mode, and it was just one of those like, man, like this is the signature performance, Jason Tatum's signature performance, and what better timing than not only Game 7, but then going into the Eastern Conference Finals. But yeah, I mean, look, we learned a lot about this team, right? The way that they're able to bounce back, the way they're able to fight, right? After being down 3-0, they wait and wait and wait until like their back is absolutely against the wall, and then they have to react. But that's their character, right? That's who they were this year, and that's I think what we're gonna remember most, right? I mean, the good and the bad. You know, the Tatum going off, but then the Celtics going down 3-0. Celtics coming back from 3-3. You know, Derek White's amazing, historic shot, but all of a sudden it doesn't matter as much because they lost Game 7. Like that's sort of the story of the 2022-23 Celtics. Unfortunately, that's what we'll remember.
The Cornet contest, way up there for me.
You'll never forget that. Huh? Well, I'll never forget how it took on a life of its own in the national, you know, landscape, right? I feel like it was only going to be a local thing, and once it was like the national talking heads were talking about it, I was like, okay, well, Cornet's arrived. he's a positional player, right? He was getting steady minutes. It wasn't like he was one of those guys that checks in when the score is lopsided. So yeah, that was a pretty cool story.
I also have the Bus One boys. That was a big NBC one. They really loved that one, but they made the shirts by the end. Whenever those guys got into a game, by the way, and I know people usually stop watching when that happened, the Celtics went on some massive runs with those guys. Pritchard, Muscala, Hauser, Cornet, and Grant was usually out there with them, right?
Yeah. Remember the last game of the season? Pritchard had a triple-double.
Yeah, I have that on the list as well. He was amazing that night. Those guys were so good. You probably could have put them on the court for a full season and maybe made the 10 seed.
It was
that's how good those guys played together.
It was like a tryout for Pritchard every single time. I love that about him, man. Like he takes every opportunity like it's his last, and that's what you're supposed to do in this league. And that's why I'm sure whether it's here or if he finds another home, like it's going to be beneficial for him. You know, and what I mean by that is if he does stick around, then my guess is someone like Brogdon or Smart. I don't know. One of those guys aren't going to be here anymore, right? I don't see Pritchard still on this roster, you know, with the same depth chart at the guard position, right? So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, Bus One boys, I'll always remember for the story and Blake Griffin and the player that he was in the locker room. And
Blake, who could forget that?
I was always a fan of the Blake signing, man. I just unfortunately the flip side of that is I'm always going to remember how they all got dissed, man, in the postseason. You know, I hate this. I hated it from the moment it happened. I thought it was cool for Game 6 or 7, but the whole 7-man rotation, this team wasn't built for that. You know, and I felt like it was a shot at guys like Blake and you know even Sam Hauser. All of a sudden got roped in with those guys when he was a rotational guy. Yeah, he's technically a Bus One boy, right? He was part of that crew, that clique, but he got more steady minutes than all those guys, and all of a sudden he was right at the end of the bench with the rest of them. So
Luke making the lemon squares is incredible. It was the game where they melted down.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And you know what else I love? I love how their all their lockers are right next to one another. So you knew exactly where
they were sitting on the table across from all those lockers, and no one was grabbing them. And then Muscala finally came over and grabbed one. It was like, all right. And I was asked him how it was, but yeah, no one would grab the lemon squares after they melted down. I think they were up by 28 against the Nets in that game. Just one of those games this year that made you go, "What is going on with this team?"
Yeah, no one was in the mood. I get it. That's fine. I would have grabbed one. I mean, if I was a Celtics player, not as a reporter, but I'm a fan.
Later in the year, he made some chocolate ones. I think it was like an Oreo kind of deal.
Wasn't that after a win? Yeah, I feel like that was a happy day, right? That was after a win, I think.
Yeah, I think Jared tried one and he was like, "It's good." I wasn't in there for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, they were like, Jared, this aren't for you, bro. I'm just kidding.
The Derek White shot, I mean, come on. Historic stuff. I'm so I'm so frustrated that no one's gonna remember it now.
Everyone's gonna say, yeah, but they lost the big one. Like that's gonna be the punchline.
It was the
Yeah,
craziest moment of the year, and being there in Miami, I didn't know what was going on at all because I was still trying to figure out what happened with the free throws. I thought the Celtics were down 3, so when White got the putback, I was like, did it bounce up and in? Like, did it kind of bounce out and like jump around and go back in off Smart's hands? But no, they were only down 1, and they only needed that putback, and he got it up and in time. And then the whole bench went crazy. I thought they were complaining about a call or something, but they were celebrating a
no, they
win.
were celebrating. See, so you were confused about that. I was confused if they were even going to look at it again because all of a sudden there's a graphic across the screen that says final Celtics, eliminate. I'm like, wait, what? Like, because I'm looking at it like I'm not.
On the screen?
On the screen. Yeah, you haven't seen it? I'll send it to you. There's people were posting it all over. Like, how can you guys make this graphic? It was like final score, in parentheses, Miami wins series 4-3 or whatever, or 4-2. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I think that's good. I wasn't 100% sure, but I just knew I needed just one replay and I'll be able to tell. And the moment you saw the ball out of his hands was 0.01, you're like, oh, it's good. And then that's when they showed the Celtics players celebrating. But from your video and from guys that were there live, you're really not quite sure, because it's just not a whole lot of transparency until the PA announcer said that Celtics win, right? That's what got everyone going crazy, or at least the Celtics fans that night.
Well, the Celtics really, yeah, they were going
Celtics
crazy.
fans were so loud, man. You could just tell it was like maybe not 50-50, but close to it, just from the reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to rattle off some other ones. I think also in that series, Horford's hard smack on Grant's backside.
Oh, that's right.
The post-game interview.
And the look on Grant's face when he takes it.
Yeah, that's a good one. So many Joe ones. Joe versus Gary. I'm thinking of when Gary was like excruciating loss, and Joe was like, "You love that word, huh? Excruciating." I don't think it's that excruciating. And Joe and Gary's back and forth all year. Really, Joe and the whole media. Lots of Joe stuff. Him going crazy in the pickup games, which led to him injuring his eyes, which we remember from that pregame session. It looked like he had like, I don't know, like pink eye or something. Like his eyes just kept squinting. And later that afternoon, we found out he was out for the game, and then he missed the next game. And Damon Stoudemire coached 2 games.
2 games, wins, too. I didn't think it would be 2. Yeah.
Yeah. What else did Joe do? He did a barrel roll in front of Marcus in the locker room.
Well, he did that what was it? The oldest trick in the book that they say, someone taps your shoulder on the other side. He did that to Derek White and then ran off. I'll never forget that. That wasn't as publicized because it happened right in front of me, but I was just like, was that the head coach? Like, did he just do that? But I don't hate that stuff, man. Like that's hey, let your personality flow. I mean, that's
talking about duct tape.
That's part of being a head coach.
Going to bed.
What's up?
Remember when he said he duct tapes his mouth going to sleep or something so he can breathe through his nose?
It's just the wacky stuff.
I remember I was at a shoot around, and I think it was like 11 a.m. It was a Pacers shoot around. And I see him walking into the locker room, and I'm like, Joe, what are you doing here? He's like, this is when I show up. I'm like, 11 a.m.? He's like, yep. For a 7:30 game. The gum, we all remember the gum. Tatum saying Joe wasn't out there chewing the shit out of some gum.
Chewing the shit out of gum, yeah.
The timeouts drove everybody crazy. We had the incident in Milwaukee where it was that tough loss at the end. Grant turned the ball over. He was clearly frustrated, and he was out of there. He was heading for the bus right before we were going to his press conference, and we had to chase him down and do an impromptu press conference in the hall. But
the best, you guys, huh?
Yeah, and the best quote all year was when the royal family showed up. They were getting booed.
Yeah.
And he goes, the only royal family I acknowledge is Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, which I think was probably his best quote of the year.
I think I said something out loud, like, hey, like something like that, like it was a bar or something.
You were there for that? I don't think I was in the room for that.
I think I was like, hey, or something like that. It just came out naturally. Yeah, I like that. I mean, every now and then he reminds us of his faith. And yeah, hey, it was a heck of a year, man. I mean, obviously the Celtics didn't, it didn't end the way that it was supposed to, or at least that we anticipated. But Joe, we saw the learning curve, right? I mean, from start to finish, for how this whole thing started. Us finding out, days before media day that Joe Mazzulla is going to be the head coach, and then, you fast forward to Game 7, and the fact that the Celtics came back from that 3-0 deficit, and maybe because in the heat of the moment, I wasn't quite sure ready to say, I was like, look, it's a decision that they have to make. But I think you would agree with this, Bobby, that 48 hours removed from Game 7, it was kind of like, wait, you got to give Joe another shot here, right? I mean, look, top 5 or top 4, coach of the year, and to be put in that situation. A lot of the stuff that Brad Stevens was saying, we knew that already, right? That transition wasn't easy. But I think what worried us was that how is this team going to respond again to this head coach? And when you look at the way they responded at the end of that Eastern Conference Finals series, yes, it's not the outcome you wanted, but it's promising, right? I mean, if you're completely checked out, or you don't want to, if you've checked out on a head coach, you don't respond in that manner, right? The way they did. And we didn't talk enough about the rest of his coaching staff. I mean, we really did. I mean, you know what, Bobby? You actually brought up when they lost Damon Stoudemire. You talked about how, like, man, that could be a big loss. There wasn't a whole lot of pieces there. I mean, I guess that sort of started the conversation. But man, like, now going into it, you're like, he needs somebody out there, some type of veteran that he can lean on and just sort of not guide him, but just sort of talk him through situations that took him a while to get used to, right? Whether it's the timeout thing, or whether it's the, taking on the media and not taking things so personal, not being so defensive. I think all that plays a part into going into his second year as a much improved head coach, and someone who's learned from that first season.
Yeah, Horford, the elite shooter exchange was really funny.
Oh man, that's classic.
I love the Blake spot starts. You mentioned
you
him
broke
earlier.
that.
Those were great. Yeah. I'm going down my list here. I have a long list. Grant, there's a couple of Grant moments. Of course, the Batman interview. We had never seen anything like that, and that's the kind of stuff you just.
Yo, good question. Sorry to cut you off here, but I don't know if you put this on there, but like, remember the vase thing? Jaylen Brown cutting his hand. Like, we still buying that?
That was strange. They made
You
a
have to wait
shirt.
for like the end of his career memoir or whatever to find out what really happened. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm buying that.
And then he said, I think, what did he say? I forget what word he used, but I said it burst. It burst open in the game where it reopened. I think he said it split open. Yeah, his hand split open. I said it burst open like it exploded. I misquoted him that night.
You're just a natural thesaurus. That's all it is, man. A good writer like that. That's what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. What else
you forgot about that too.
Grant said, "I'm gonna make both against Cleveland." Not the best year for Grant.
Yeah.
And then he missed both, and they ended up going on to lose to Cavs. A lot of
That's
really
good for Grant losses. Though, man. He got some thick skin. You know what I mean? Like, he had to take on. He had to. I don't know. I want to call him embarrassing moments, but he was kind of a meme for a little while for a couple of reasons, right? Whether it was that or the whole Jimmy Butler thing, and he responded.
The Butler thing on there. Eye to eye, nose to nose.
You see those guys? I don't know if I sent you that picture, but they were selling those T-shirts outside in Miami of the nose to nose, like WWE style confrontation between Jimmy Butler and Grant Williams. But that didn't crush him. You know what I mean? That didn't take away his confidence. So that's good. Good for Grant.
Similar situation against the Knicks. Brown missed a couple free throws. They lost the game, and Joe said, "I love you," I think, after.
Yeah.
Which Jimmy and John got a kick out of.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the ball guy sprinting off the court?
Yeah. That's my guy. Yeah.
You know that guy, right?
Yeah. My dude, yeah, man, that was funny because that was a nationally televised game too. So he was getting messages from everyone about that.
Tatum was dying laughing about that too on the
side. He was cracking up. That's right. He was sitting on the bench when it happened because it was like towards the end, right? Yeah.
Do you remember the Celtics Nuggets game that got delayed like almost an hour because of the net?
Yeah. And then it happened again like a week later. Remember?
And yeah, Grandy was like, "Oh no!" And then they just fixed it quickly this time.
What is up with Ball Arena? Jeez.
Yeah, there's so many, man. Continuing on Joe, there was a weird play on the sideline. They were playing the Pacers, and Neesmith was trying to get the ball, and Joe like fought for the ball with him, and like they were wrestling for the ball. And I think Abby asked after, and like Joe just kind of like blew it off, like, "Yeah, you gotta fight for the ball." He also had like a confrontation with, I think it was.
That's what I'm thinking of.
A Raptors player.
Yeah, he like brushed his shoulder. And he kind of turned around. And was like, "Yo, you got a problem?" I was like, "Geez,
he had to hold him back."
He still got that
Rob broke the
gritty
basket, yeah.
backup point guard mentality. Like I'm not taking crap from no one. I think that's why he loves Peyton Pritchard so much. It reminds him of himself. But yeah, man, Majulo's got a lot of moments here.
Rob, yeah, he did bend the net. Rob also hit a jump shot. Everyone went crazy. I forget who it was against, but it was like his only jump shot all year.
No, remember when Blake like dunked twice and people lost it? Like, oh, he's back.
The Hornets game, that was part of those great spot starts.
Yeah. He's not jumping over Ikea, but he can still get up there. Like that was the ongoing joke. I felt like even SportsCenter kept showing those highlights.
Gallinari was at every game in a suit. I know you like that one.
Yeah.
Every time he worked out, by the way, we get like 10,000 views. It'll be good having him back next year if he recovers. I hope he can be some percentage of himself because he really would have helped this year.
Yeah, and you kind of get the sense that he's not going to have a long leash, right? You know, if you don't see, some type of consistency by like I don't know, would you say Christmas or so? You know, I feel like it's going to be a tight rotation or a tight opportunity for him, and Celtics will probably look to trade him if it doesn't pan out.
You mentioned Jalen's hand. The mask was a big deal all year.
He didn't want to take it off. He was balling. He was balling with it on.
He said, I got to stay away from Jason Tatum after the collision. I think it was against Philadelphia. Tatum, we mentioned his game 6. He had a great leaner over LeBron in that Lakers road game. That was a really fun road trip against the Warriors out there. That was a really bad loss against Golden State, but he hit that leaner to force overtime.
That Saturday game, right?
Yeah. And then, of course, the tantrum in the home game against the Lakers, which, again, we're sitting way up in the
tantrum. I like that.
We're sitting way up in the balcony, and I'm like, did Beverly just grab something? And he had the camera. I was like, did he just grab someone's camera? And he was down there and got teed up going into overtime. And somehow LeBron didn't.
I forgot about the camera part.
Somehow LeBron didn't for like throwing his arms around.
I just couldn't believe what LeBron was doing. I was like, look at him. I was uncomfortable. I swear.
He fell on the floor.
He didn't just say that as a joke, man. I was like, he's making me uncomfortable. Like he's just like, he was on his knees, Bobby. I was like, what's going on right now?
Well, I told Beverly,
like, is he gonna get a tech? Like, is this okay? But
I told Beverly because I was in the locker room hanging out, and he was like, "Oh, I like your outfit or whatever." So
that's right. He did say that
a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, you ready for Celtics Lakers?" He's like, "Yeah, whatever." I'm like, "It's gonna be fun." He's like, "Yeah." But I think going out of it, he would have been like, "That was crazy. That game. That was one of my favorite games all year." Opening night.
I think he overlooked how crazy it gets when Celtics Lakers at TD.
I said that about the finals too. Everyone's like, the rivalry's dead. I was like, just wait. You would have seen.
Oh, if there was another chapter in the finals, man, that would have been
And we're still missing out. Tonight's
game close too, man. I was like, there's no way. Lakers Celtics both in the Final Four.
It was so close, just like the bubble. Opening night, this was really the quote of the year. Smart saying he could have cracked Embiid's open, but Embiid's head open.
Yeah.
He chose not to after their scuffle. That was opening night.
I love it. You think back to when remember he pushed him in Philly a couple of years back, and Embiid a couple of years back saying this is not a rivalry, and then we got the series. 7-game series. MVP Joel Embiid. Man.
Some announcer stuff. Gorman wore the eye patch. We were in New York. Like, what's going on with that? He had to deal with, what was it, like a lacerated eye or something, just like Joe. But he actually wore an eye patch on the air. I'm like, why are they even showing him on TV with this? But
and then he couldn't travel, right? Because you can't fly like that. So
that's how you ended up with Perk and Scal calling that Rockets loss, which was like, I think
that's right.
Perk was out of breath at the beginning from climbing up to the broadcast booth, and they just kept talking over each other. And I think they had like a little like beef at certain moments. It was really one of the more baffling broadcasts I've ever seen. But Eddie House was great
because Perk ain't gonna take that ain't gonna take crap from anybody. And I feel like sometimes it's Scal got jokes and he's just not in the mood for it. It's funny.
Did you like Eddie this year? I thought that was a nice addition to the team.
I liked Eddie. Yeah, I like Eddie House a lot. Especially
he was
when
tough at times on them too.
Yeah, exactly. He would challenge them, question them, and then when he was at the games too, I thought that was great too.
He was trying to offer us some pizza at one point. You remember that?
Was he?
He had a pizza. He was like trying to pass it to people all over the broadcast, the media section. We were all like, "Nah, we're good."
I don't remember that.
Coach GPT, that was so funny. I'll give Nick credit for that segment from the playoffs.
Yeah, that was good.
Derek White, we mentioned that Milwaukee game earlier in the year. His ear burst, and he had to fly home himself from Milwaukee, and he didn't miss the game.
Iron Man.
18 games for Derek White this year. White was incredible all season. That was my favorite.
Remember in Charlotte? Remember what happened in Charlotte?
What happened?
It almost looked like a concussion type situation. Remember it was a neck. I want to say a strain. Was it a strain? Remember his head, the way it jerked back looked really bad, like he hit it, against the floor, and then he checked out the rest of the game. And then it was a day in between, but back to back at Charlotte. He played in the matinee, the Martin Luther King.
The guy would always be hurt, and he just never went down. And
I was certain that was going to be the game that he missed, but nope, he played Martin Luther King Day matinee. He just needed that Sunday to rest, and he was ready to go.
Did you see Taylor's tweet? Our guy Taylor with the Celtics there, Taylor Snow.
Which one? He's got some good ones. Oh, the percentage, right? What was it?
Derek White broke Kevin McHale's record for true shooting percentage in the playoffs, 67.1% this year. White was incredible. He's going to start again next year, I think, no matter who's here.
Yeah, I think one thing we learned about Derek White is that he's probably, in terms of players that complement Tatum and Brown the best, I think he's at the top of the list. And that's not even up for debate, right? Whether it's the open looks, whether it's just that knack to, not take matters into his own hands, but like read opposing defenses and know when to drive and when to knock down that shot. I mean, he's come a long way with an entire season with the Celtics team under his belt.
Sam Hauser was great all year. I love.
I'm a huge Hauser guy, man. I'm not saying the guy would have saved the Celtics, but it would have been nice to see him in that Eastern Conference Finals.
Well, he'll be back. His brother's in this draft too, by the way. Imagine they get him. You can sign 3 two-way guys now.
Yeah, that's
summer leagues coming up. We'll have coverage of that.
We'll take full advantage of that.
The draft is 13 days away. We're gonna have a lot of coverage coming up here. The season just never stops here in CLNS Media.
They got to get this pick right, Bobby. Not to sound like Xana's, but you've missed a lot in the past few years. So what I mean by that is I'm not expecting them to draft a starter, in the second round, but hopefully it's someone that can have a future with the organization and sooner rather than later.
Yep. Oh, another one. Me and you spilling the beans on Max, his Jaylen Brown take. We never heard the end of that this year.
Yeah, don't bring that up, man. He's just now starting to forget about it.
So I'm going to get those moments up on the website.
It's not a term Max would use, but as we say, I guess we were dry snitching. Jeez, my bad.
100 moments coming this year from the Celtics season. I got a lot of funny ones lined up. I'll get those on the website soon. I actually did have this on my list as well, Josue, the Strohmeyer Swift dunk. A lot of good celebrations throughout the year.
I aged myself, but as soon as he did it, I was like, that's Strohmeyer, 100%.
Of course, show some love to our other sponsor here, AG1, athleticgreens.com/garnet. 75 vitamins, minerals, adaptogens, probiotics, and more. 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D with your purchase. Head over there and get that vitamin D full year's supply, as well as 5 free travel packs.
Such a good deal.
Some cool gear over there as well when you sign up for a subscription, and people love it. If you don't buy our commentary here, go check out those reviews. They're just sky high, and it's a great deal. It really is for all the different stuff you get in here. You can get those stuff in different places for a lot more money individually. That's athleticgreens.com/garnet. Josue, appreciate you stopping by. Like I said, 3 Dome Theories coming your way each week. We'll have a weekly Garden Report in full with the full cast here, as well as dropping in for any news throughout the week. Hope you guys had a great week, and we'll catch you next week here for more episodes.